So hopefully this isn't getting a little too boring or repetitive each week, but a lot of tariff news. And this week, he's continued to broaden the scope of this thing. So he wrote two, not executive orders, but like memorandums. Instead of just tariffs, he wrote these memos, one on digital service taxes, and then another is protecting America from adversarial investments. And by that, he just means China. With the DSTs, digital service tax, he's going for the EU, and everything else, he's going for China.
If it's all right with you, if I can talk a little bit about the digital services tax, would that be all right?
Go ahead, do that.
So I read another truth. This is sort of so fun to read his words. It can't be any better. So our incredible United States economy and undeniable American spirit has enabled the creation of the greatest technology companies on earth. Our digital economy is bigger than most of the world's countries, and the market cap of even one of our companies exceeds every European country. Instead of empowering their workers and creating opportunities, foreign governments have instead tried to tax, fine, and hinder Americans' technology companies. Both friend and foe have been treating American tech companies harshly, as if our companies are their piggy bank. This will now end. It is my objective to level the playing field and end these attacks. We are putting these countries on notice to end their unfair treatment of American companies, large and small. Our companies are the greatest investors in the world. So our tech companies are the greatest investors in the world, and their investments will go only to where American companies are treated fairly. Our ingenuity, grit, drive, and perseverance have built America. If these countries want to participate in the AI industrial revolution, it's time to choose sides with America, not against us. And we signed that on Friday, sir.
Okay, very big deal, right?
Huge.
Thank you.
I was kind of like watching those things. It's kind of theatrical. He's got a lot of big stats out there, but I thought it was kind of interesting. He's like some of these biggest tech companies are larger than every European economy, which, you know, you're talking about these trillion-dollar companies. It is pretty big. Traditional corporate taxes are based on profits and physical presence within a country. In contrast, though, digital service taxes are applied directly to revenue, regardless of profitability. So some of these huge tech companies, on their revenue, it's massive. It's hundreds of billions of dollars.
Yeah, that's wild.
First one is defending American companies and innovators from overseas extortion and unfair fines and penalties. So these digital service taxes, so they're meant to counteract foreign imposed taxes on U.S. tech firms, and these are primarily imposed by European countries, Canada, and the U.K. And so this is looking at preventing unfair targeting of American companies while also exploring trade retaliation options. Some of the key points on this was to investigate and possibly retaliate against these digital service taxes, and this is under the Section 301 of the Trade Act of 1974. Separately, it wanted to specifically review Canada's digital service tax under the USMCA. Next, they wanted to monitor international tax policies that are disproportionately targeting U.S. firms. And then they wanted to seek a global moratorium on digital tariffs to prevent future discriminatory taxation, and then establish a formal reporting system with which U.S. businesses can track these things.
Yeah, I didn't know anything about this. This is new to me. So this is something they're going to like look into it. So
Seems
now,
like,
I guess, Trump talks to a bunch of important people, and they're probably mentioning like, look, we're getting taxed on our revenue over in different countries that we just got to pay. We're just like funding them.
Yeah, I mean, it's this has been happening for years over in Europe in particular. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but it's like I remember seeing headlines of like it's these massive fines that were getting charged by the EU to like Google and all these U.S. tech companies.
I've heard about the fines, but these are taxes. This is just something that's taken from them directly. It's just something they pay every year.
Appears to be. So we can do some
Pretty
more
wild.
research on this, but it looks like, it's imposed on revenue directly, which is between 1% and 5% on hundreds of billions of dollars of revenue. It's really a huge amount of money. He's just looking for any and all reasons to keep going with rebalancing the global trade system. Second one is called the America First investment policy, really all about China. And the main thing that people took away from this is that it explicitly labeled China as a foreign adversary. So just quickly going over some of the main points in this, it wants to encourage foreign investment from U.S. allies while blocking investment from adversarial nations. And it talks about China primarily in that respect. It wants to enhance national security by limiting control over critical U.S. sectors like technology, infrastructure, and farmland. And then some of the key directives in place that it talked about was to expedite approvals for allied investors via this fast track process, particularly for investments that are over $1 billion. Then specific to China, it says it wants to revoke Chinese and adversarial access to U.S. technology, financial markets, and real estate. The main takeaway was that it was just really calling out China specifically in terms of like broadening out the scope of this quote unquote trade war. He's just looking for lots of other things that he can do, that he can point to say that we really need to take a different stance here. Chinese Ministry of Commerce came out on this. So they sent out this very stern letter, very angry letter in response. They said, this U.S. practice, it generalizes the concept of national security. It's discriminatory and is a typical non-market practice that seriously affects economic and trade cooperation. Now that's true, but that's kind of the point. He is going out to disrupt the normal economic trade cooperation. Furthermore, they go on to say it's going to seriously undermine the confidence of Chinese companies in investing in the United States, hopes the United States will provide a fair, transparent, stable, and predictable business environment for Chinese companies. And again, it's kind of funny at this point, these are the same things that Trump is saying to them. It's all about fairness in trade.
Right.
They come back and say the same thing. They call it weaponizing economic trade issues. Trump calls it reintroducing fairness to the system.
Yeah. Did it restrict them from investing, or was it explicitly for revoking Chinese adversarial access, expanding the roles? Did it stop them from investing?
I think with one of these memos, it's a little bit light on explicit detail like that. Like this isn't even like an executive action.
So maybe my initial reaction to this, which was that, if he's really going after the trade deficit, you can go at it like at two sides. One has to do with, the import of the goods, and the other one is like the import of the cash that sort of balances that financial account. Like if you stop them from investing at all, then you kind of wonder what that would do to a trade deficit. I guess they would just have to sit on the dollars or whatever abroad. We talked about this in an earlier episode.
Right. You want to bring in foreign investment, but you don't want a chronic trade deficit like we were talking about. And like even more obviously, it doesn't seem like a great idea if you were to have massive amounts of money from another country. China's got, a lot of billionaires as well, to come into the US and, start buying American companies, at best, just making the day-to-day decisions, at worst, just coming in and stealing technology or intellectual property and just taking it away. This overall, it's pretty light on detail, but I just see it as just another step forward in the pressure campaign here.
Yeah, this is getting juicy. Well, it already was, but
people started asking him about not only some of these actions, but also they said, "Oh, well, but what about that 25% on Mexico and Canada? You said that's going to be postponed for a month. That's in a few days. That's in March 4th next week. Is that still coming?" He said, "Oh yeah, absolutely. It's going to be here April 2nd." And then someone had to correct him and said, "No, that's your reciprocal tariffs. These ones are coming March 4th."
Oh, that's interesting.
And so then the next day he had to come out here and
put it in
clear the air.
So do you think it kind of leans? This sounds like, he's probably working with a lot of like, incoming and out information that's constantly changing, sort of in the sense of, is this more of a negotiation tactic as opposed to like a real policy?
It definitely does seem like he's playing kind of fast and loose with some of the details. He's saying a lot of different things across different dates, but just continually ramping up this pressure campaign around the world now, basically. But yeah, it's like how much of it is just a negotiating tactic? Well, for one thing, he already imposed an additional 10% on China a month ago. And then in what he's saying here is so the 25% is coming back to Mexico and Canada. Whether that occurs or not is another question. During that cabinet meeting, people were asking about what they could do, and they just kept hammering this point, like he does here, on the fentanyl stuff, stopping the flow of drugs, protecting the border. So he already has imposed on China. I think he's seeing that some of their responses are angry letters can only go so far. So he's, maybe empowered to keep pushing on this. But at the same time, he also said on the campaign trail that he was going to impose 60% on China. So after this one, he'll be about a third of the way there.
Right. Interesting.
Financial markets have started to turn around a little bit as well. So ever since Trump had been elected, the attitude towards risk assets, they've all been going only in one direction, just straight upward. This week, though, things have turned around a little bit, and a lot of this is due to some of the economic data that came out. There was this consumer confidence report that said fell to the lowest level since 2021. There was the first revision of the fourth quarter GDP number came out. Their inflationary measure that's within that was revised upward. So like we were talking about in a previous episode, we're seeing inflation bump up again. That combined with this narrative in the media that's everywhere that tariffs are going to be inflationary, they're going to exacerbate the inflation that's going on. Whether that's going to happen or not, I really don't think it will, but that's this narrative that's being pushed everywhere. And another metric that people have pointed to recently is on like companies' recent earning calls. The number of times that tariffs have been mentioned is just like through the roof, basically where it was in 2018, 19 or so. So everyone's starting to feel a little bit jittery about this, consumers and companies alike. This is a topic I'd like to cover a little more on another day, but over 2018 and 2019, there was no inflation. Rather, inflation actually declined a bit. We were right around or below the Fed's 2% target, and then as this quote unquote tariff war went on, inflation fell further from there throughout the entirety of the second half of this 18-month.
Yeah, that's a good point. I've been through this before.
There's a lot of reasons why that could happen. I think there's some pretty compelling arguments. So again, I'm going to save this for another day. But what I want to talk about in a future episode is that Trump's appointee for the Council of Economic Advisors, he's this guy from a hedge fund named Stephen Miran, and he wrote this interesting paper that's been getting quite a significant amount of press over the past week or so. And it's more or less putting a little bit of academic rigor around the framework that Trump is pushing continuously. It's saying it's really in defense of tariffs, not for the sake of having tariffs, not for saying, we just need to be fair. That's kind of what Trump says, but it gives this much more holistic analytical framework. So in this paper, he's talking about not just why tariffs are not going to be such a bad thing, but also why they're almost kind of structurally necessary when you're in a world where you've got one country providing the global reserve currency, providing this massive amounts of reserves to the rest of the world, either related or unrelated to the US. And one of the downstream effects of that are these chronic trade deficits that we talked about in a recent episode. So we'll get more into this later, but it's as this tariff situation is unfolding, it's interesting to see a more rigorous look.
Yeah, providing some more academic rigor seems important.
I think this really has the potential to be a really, really major shift in the global trading system. So with that, we'll
all right,
we'll save that rigor for another day.
Yeah, exciting, interesting. Till next time. Thanks for tuning in.
See ya.